In a modest garage on the outskirts of town, Marcus Townsend works miracles with machines others have given up on. At 52, he's a single father who can barely make rent. But his hands speak the language of engines like poetry. When a pristine Ferrari F40, one of only 400 ever made, rolls into his shop on a flatbed, he knows this could change everything. Every elite mechanic in the city has failed to revive it. The owner, Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Innovations, watches skeptically as Marcus works through the night, his weathered hands dancing across the engine. By dawn, the impossible happens. The Ferrari roars to life. But instead of writing, "A check," Victoria asks a question that leaves Marcus stunned. Could this be the beginning of something far more valuable than any repair job? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn sunrise painted long shadows across Marcus Townsend's workbench as he traced his fingers over the worn leather of his wallet. Inside, beneath a scratched plastic sleeve, a faded photograph showed a younger version of himself with Sarah, his late wife, her smile as radiant as ever. Beside them stood their daughter Emma, then just 6, clutching a toy wrench with the same determination she now showed with real tools at 16. "Dad, you're doing it again," Emma's voice carried through the garage, accompanied by the familiar squeak of the side door. She wore her mother's old denim jacket, now adorned with patches from various engineering competitions. Remembering won't pay the bills. Marcus tucked the wallet away, managing a smile. "Someone's up early. Someone never went to sleep." Emma set 2 coffee cups on the workbench, the aroma of French roast filling the space. "I was finishing my robotics project. Mrs. Henderson thinks it could win state this year." "You should be sleeping, not building robots at dawn," Marcus said. But pride crept into his voice despite his paternal concern. Emma had inherited her mother's brilliance and his stubborn dedication to fixing things. Sometimes he wondered if she was raising herself more than he was raising her. The morning light streamed through the garage's dusty windows, illuminating decades of accumulated tools and memories. Every surface told a story. The dented toolbox his father had given him on his 16th birthday, the wall of specialized wrenches he'd collected over 30 years of working on everything from lawn mowers to luxury cars, the small shelf of engineering textbooks Emma had started collecting. Bills came in. Emma pulled a stack of envelopes from her backpack, each one marked with increasingly urgent red stamps. Mr. Patterson called again about the rent. Marcus took a long sip of coffee, buying time before responding. "We'll figure it out, we always do. That's what you said last month." Emma's tone was gentle but firm, so much like her mother's. It made his chest ache. "And the month before that, maybe if you actually charge people what you're worth." "I charge what's fair," Marcus interrupted, more sharply than he intended. He softened his voice. "Besides, most of our customers can barely afford that." The truth was, Marcus couldn't bring himself to turn away anyone who needed help, even when they couldn't pay full price. Old Mrs. Wilson's ancient Volvo, Mr. Lee's delivery van that kept his restaurant business running, the beat-up Honda that young Tommy used to drive to community college. They all represented someone's livelihood, someone's dreams. A familiar rumble outside announced the arrival of their first customer of the day. Through the open garage door, Marcus watched Joe Miller's rusted pickup truck limp into the lot, smoke curling from under the hood in an ominous gray ribbon. "Speaking of charging what you're worth," Emma muttered, but she was already reaching for her toolbox. Despite her protests about his business practices, she loved the work as much as he did. Marcus grabbed his diagnostic tablet, the one luxury he'd allowed himself in recent years, and headed out to meet Joe. The farmer's weathered face showed the same worry Marcus had seen too often lately, the fear of a repair bill that could break an already strained budget. "She's running rough again," Joe said by way of greeting, patting the truck's hood like an old horse. I know you just fixed her last month, but let's take a look. Marcus cut in kindly, already popping the hood. He didn't mention that he'd only charged Joe for parts last time, or that he'd been doing the same for half his customers this past year. The garage might be struggling, but he still slept better, knowing he'd helped his neighbors keep their lives running. Emma appeared at his elbow with the toolbox, her quick eyes already assessing the engine. "Injectors again?" she asked, reaching for the diagnostic port. "Good catch," Marcus nodded, pride momentarily overwhelming his financial worries. "Why, don't you take point on this one?" As he watched his daughter work, confidently explaining each step to Joe, Marcus felt a familiar mix of joy and concern. Emma deserved college, deserved a shot at the engineering career she dreamed of, but with the garage's income barely covering their basic needs, he couldn't see how to make that happen. The morning continued in its familiar rhythm. More customers, more repairs, more payments that didn't quite cover the work performed. By noon, Marcus had fixed 3 cars, given 2 free diagnostic checks, and added another name to his mental list of people who would pay when things got better. What he didn't know was that fate was about to roll into his garage on 4 Italian tires, bringing with it a chance that would change everything, if only he was brave enough to take it. The Ferrari arrived like a fallen star, its pristine Rosso Corsa paint dulled by a layer of road dust, strapped to a flatbed truck that seemed almost apologetic about its cargo silence. Marcus was elbow-deep in a transmission repair when he heard Emma's sharp intake of breath from the garage entrance. "Dad," she whispered, reverence in her voice. "That's an F40." The truck driver, a weathered man in his 60s, climbed down from his cab, clutching a leather-bound maintenance logbook. "You Marcus Townsend?" Before Marcus could answer, the click of heels on concrete announced another arrival. Victoria Sterling emerged from a black Mercedes that had pulled in behind the flatbed, her presence as commanding as the Ferrari's. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent, but it was her eyes that caught his attention, sharp, analytical, and currently fixed on him with an intensity that made him want to check his shirt for grease stains. "Mr. Townsend," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Innovations. I understand you're something of a miracle worker." Marcus wiped his hands carefully on a shop rag before shaking hers. "I just fix cars, Ms. Sterling." "That's not what I've heard." She gestured to the Ferrari. "This F40 has been to every premium shop in the tri-state area. Nobody can figure out what's wrong with it. The engine starts, runs for exactly 37 seconds, then dies every time." Emma had drifted closer to the flatbed, her eyes scanning the Ferrari's lines with the same focus she brought to her engineering projects. "Have they checked the fuel delivery system? These had unique pressure requirements." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. "They have, along with everything else." She turned back to Marcus. "Your reputation reached me through rather unusual channels. Apparently, you restored Judge Martinez's 1960 Aston Martin when every other mechanic had declared it beyond salvation." Marcus remembered that job, 3 weeks of late nights, custom fabricated parts, and solutions that would have made the original engineers either proud or horrified. "That was different. This is a challenge." Victoria's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm prepared to pay whatever you think is fair, but I need it running perfectly by the end of the week." "The end of the week?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Emma. "That's impossible. These cars are—" "Nothing is impossible, Mr. Townsend. That's what you told Judge Martinez, isn't it?" She pulled a business card from her jacket pocket. "I've heard all about your payment plans, your sliding scales for customers who can't afford market rates. Admirable, if financially unsound. Fix this car, and I might have a proposition that could solve those problems." The truck driver had been quietly unloading the Ferrari, its red form now gleaming under the garage lights. He handed Marcus the maintenance logbook, its pages filled with stamps from prestigious service centers and notes in multiple languages. Emma was already circling the car, her phone out, comparing something to an online reference. "Dad, look at this." She pointed to a slight discoloration near one of the intake manifolds. "Remember that weird issue with Mr. Peterson's Jaguar last year?" Marcus did remember. It had been a similar problem, intermittent failure caused by a cascade of seemingly unrelated issues. He'd solved it by thinking outside the factory specifications, trusting his instincts and 30 years of experience. Victoria watched their exchange with interest. "Your daughter seems quite knowledgeable." "Emma's going to be an engineer," Marcus said automatically, then caught himself. "If we can figure out the tuition." Something flickered in Victoria's expression, recognition perhaps, or calculation. "Well then, Mr. Townsend, will you take the job?" Marcus looked at the Ferrari, at his daughter's hopeful expression, at the stack of bills visible on his office desk through the window. The logical answer was no. This kind of pressure, this timeline, with a car this rare and complex, it was asking for failure. But then he thought about Emma's college applications scattered across their kitchen table, about the dreams she sketched in her engineering notebook late at night when she thought he was sleeping. Sometimes the biggest risks came disguised as impossibilities. "We'll need to start right away," he said finally. "And I'll want to do a complete diagnostic before I promise anything." Victoria's smile widened, becoming more genuine. "I thought you might say that. I'll leave you to it." She turned to go, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Townsend, I'll be watching your progress closely." As her Mercedes pulled away, Emma was already pulling out the diagnostic equipment. "We're going to need coffee," she said. "Lots of coffee." Marcus picked up the maintenance logbook, its leather cover smooth with age and history. Whatever secrets this Ferrari held, whatever challenge Victoria Sterling was really presenting, he had a feeling their lives were about to change. He just hoped it would be for the better. Midnight found Marcus kneeling beside the Ferrari, his father's old toolbox open at his feet. The battered steel case held more than tools. It contained lessons learned over decades, passed from father to son in quiet moments just like this. His fingers found a custom-made wrench his father had fabricated for particularly stubborn Italian engines, its grip worn smooth by years of use. "I thought I might find you still here." Emma's voice drifted from the doorway. She carried two thermoses, steam rising from their tops in the cool night air. "Any breakthrough?" Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully. "Maybe. Come look at this." Under the harsh workshop lights, the Ferrari's engine bay gleamed like a jewel box. Marcus had spent hours studying the maintenance logbook, tracing the car's history through service stamps and technicians' notes. Now, with Emma at his shoulder, he pointed to a seemingly innocent collection of wires and tubes. "See how the fuel line curves here? It's factory standard, but your grandfather would have called it lazy engineering." He picked up the custom wrench. He always said the obvious solution usually isn't the right one. Emma settled cross-legged beside him, her own coffee forgotten. "Like that Porsche last year, when everyone said it needed a new transmission, but you found the real problem in the control module." "Exactly," Marcus smiled, remembering his father's voice. "Cars talk to you, son. You just have to learn their language." He reached deeper, into the toolbox, past the standard wrenches and sockets, to the special tools his father had crafted over the years. Each one told a story of a problem solved, a challenge overcome. The Ferrari's engine ticked as it cooled, like a patient waiting to share its secrets. Marcus had already verified what the other mechanics had found. The engine would start, run, briefly, then die. But something about the way it failed nagged at him. The sound wasn't quite right. "Hand me that diagnostic tablet," he said, reaching for another of his father's custom tools. "I want to try something." Emma passed him the tablet, then leaned in closer. "Wait, are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" "Depends. Are you thinking about that weird pressure fluctuation we saw in the data?" Marcus grinned as Emma's eyes lit up. Like him, she could read an engine's vital signs like a doctor reading a patient's chart. Together, they worked through the next hour in comfortable silence, broken only by occasional murmurs of "try this" or "look here." Emma's fresh perspective, combined with Marcus's experience in a familiar dance, one they'd perfected over years of working side by side. Around 2 in the morning, Emma straightened up suddenly. "Dad, what if it's not the fuel system at all? What if that's just a symptom?" Marcus looked up from where he was tracing a wire harness. "Go on." "Well, remember what you always say about Italian electronics of this era, how they're like temperamental artists." She grabbed the tablet, fingers flying across the screen. "Look at these voltage readings. They're within spec, but barely. What if—" She didn't finish her sentence, but she didn't need to. Marcus was already reaching for another of his father's special tools, this one designed to test electrical connections in tight spaces. His father had made it for a troublesome Lamborghini back in '85, and it had saved them countless hours since. Then, "Emma," he said slowly as the readings started making sense, "I think you just found our ghost in the machine." A soft sound from the garage doorway made them both look up. Victoria Sterling stood there, elegant despite the late hour, watching them work with an unreadable expression. How long she'd been there, Marcus couldn't tell. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, stepping into the light. "I was curious about your progress." Marcus straightened, suddenly aware of his grease-stained hands and rumpled shirt. "We might have found something, but I'll need to fabricate a special tool to verify it." Victoria's eyes fell on the old toolbox, then moved to Emma's excited face, taking in the easy rapport between father and daughter. Something in her expression softened slightly. "You know," she said, "when Judge Martinez told me about you, he said something interesting. He said you don't just fix cars, you understand them. I'm beginning to see what he meant." Emma beamed with pride, but Marcus felt a flutter of uncertainty. There was something in Victoria's tone, something that suggested this late-night visit wasn't just about checking on the Ferrari's repair. He looked down at his father's toolbox, at the specialized instruments that represented generations of problem-solving. Whatever game Victoria Sterling was playing, he had a feeling they were about to move into the next round. Victoria Sterling had built her empire by reading people as precisely as Marcus read engines. Now, seated in a corner of his garage, her Mont Blanc pen moving across the pages of her worn leather notebook, she found herself documenting something unexpected. 3:47 a.m. Subject demonstrates unprecedented approach to diagnostic process. Integration of intuitive and analytical methods suggests unique problem-solving framework. Note, daughter's contribution significant. Possible hereditary component to mechanical aptitude. She paused, watching Marcus and Emma work. They moved around each other with the synchronization of dancers, anticipating each other's needs without words. It was nothing like the sterile efficiency of her company's R&D department, where engineers in pristine lab coats worked under fluorescent lights with state-of-the-art equipment. This was different, raw, real. "Coffee?" Emma's voice startled her from her observations. The teenager held out a fresh cup, steam rising in the pre-dawn air. Victoria accepted it, noting the chipped mug's NASA logo. "You're interested in aerospace engineering?" "Among other things." Emma's eyes drifted to the notebook. "Are you taking notes on us?" Before Victoria could respond, a triumphant sound from Marcus drew their attention. He emerged from under the Ferrari's hood, holding what looked like a twisted piece of metal. "Found it! Emma, remember what you said about the voltage readings?" Victoria watched as father and daughter bent over the component, their excitement palpable. She added another note. "Collaborative problem-solving exemplary, potential applications for corporate team structure." The previous mechanics were looking at it wrong, Marcus explained, more to Emma than to Victoria. They saw the symptoms, but missed the cause. This connector's degradation was creating a cascade effect through the electrical system. Victoria stood, moving closer. But surely their diagnostic equipment would have caught that. Marcus smiled, and for the first time, Victoria noticed how it transformed his whole face. "Sometimes machines lie, Miss Sterling. You have to trust your instincts as much as your instruments. Please, she found herself saying, call me Victoria. She watched him fabricate a replacement part using equipment that belonged in a museum, his movements precise despite the ancient tools. Her notebook filled with observations, but increasingly she found herself writing about things that had nothing to do with mechanical expertise. The way his hands moved with both strength and delicacy, how his eyes crinkled when Emma made a clever suggestion. The quiet confidence that had nothing to do with ego and everything to do with earned wisdom. You're not just here about the car, are you? Emma's question was soft but direct. Victoria met the teenager's knowing gaze. What makes you say that? The way you're watching us, like we're some kind of experiment. Emma's tone held no accusation, only curiosity. Plus, someone with your resources could have shipped this car to Ferrari's own restoration department. Smart girl. Victoria closed her notebook, considering her response. Let's just say I'm interested in more than just mechanical repairs. The business proposition you mentioned? Something like that. Victoria stood, brushing off her skirt. The sun would be rising soon, and she had an early board meeting. Your father has something rare, Emma. Something that can't be taught in engineering schools or corporate training programs. I know, Emma said simply, pride evident in her voice. As if on cue, Marcus called Emma over to help him test the newly fabricated part. Victoria watched them work, adding one final note to her notebook. Potential far exceeds initial projections. Risk assessment may need revision, personal factors requiring additional consideration. She gathered her things, quietly slipping out as the first rays of dawn painted the garage in shades of gold. In her car, she pulled out her phone, cancelling her morning meetings. Some things were more important than quarterly reports and shareholder presentations. Besides, she had a feeling she was about to witness something extraordinary. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when Emma pulled her engineering sketchbook from her backpack. The worn spiral notebook, its cover decorated with carefully drawn mechanical diagrams, held more than just homework. It contained dreams, sketched in precise technical detail. Dad, look at this. She flipped to a fresh page, pencil flying across paper. If we modify the connection point here, we could prevent the same issue from recurring. Her quick strokes evolved into a detailed technical drawing, complete with measurements and material specifications. Marcus leaned over her shoulder, coffee forgotten in his hand. That's actually brilliant. He turned to Victoria, who had returned after her brief departure. Emma's been designing custom solutions since she was 12. Remember that alternator bracket for the '67 Mustang? Emma blushed, but kept drawing. That was just a simple adaptation. That was innovation, Victoria said, moving closer to study the sketch. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in the elegant simplicity of Emma's design. This is remarkable work. Have you considered applying for engineering internships? A shadow crossed Emma's face. I've looked into some programs, but most of the good ones are either unpaid or require connections we don't have. Marcus finished quietly. Victoria pulled up a chair, her usual corporate reserve softening. May I? She gestured to Emma's sketchbook. As she flipped through the pages, her expression grew increasingly thoughtful. Each page revealed another invention, another solution to a complex mechanical problem, all rendered with professional precision. Here, Emma said, pointing to a particularly detailed drawing. This is a modification I designed for the diagnostic system we use. It helps detect subtle electrical fluctuations that most standard equipment misses. That's actually what gave me the idea about the Ferrari's problem. Marcus watched the interaction with a mixture of pride and protective concern. He'd seen Emma's talents dismissed before by those who couldn't see past her age or their circumstances. But Victoria was different. She studied each design with genuine interest, asking technical questions that revealed her own engineering background. These aren't just clever fixes, she said finally. "These are innovations that could have significant commercial applications." Emma's eyes lit up. From her backpack, she pulled out another notebook, this one filled with even more ambitious projects. "I've been working on this concept for an adaptive diagnostic system. It learns from each repair, building a database of unusual problems and solutions." Victoria's polished professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing genuine excitement. "Show me." For the next hour, the Ferrari sat forgotten as Emma walked them through her idea. She'd clearly spent countless nights developing it, combining artificial intelligence concepts with practical mechanical experience. Marcus watched in amazement as his daughter confidently answered Victoria's increasingly complex technical questions. "The biggest challenge," Emma explained, sketching rapidly, "is teaching the system to recognize the kind of intuitive problems Dad solves. It's not just about data, it's about pattern recognition across seemingly unrelated factors." Victoria nodded, her own corporate notes forgotten as she engaged with Emma's ideas. "Have you considered incorporating machine learning algorithms? My company has been developing something similar for manufacturing diagnostics." "Actually, yes." Emma flipped to another page covered in flowcharts and code snippets. "I've been studying programming in my spare time. I think if we combine traditional diagnostic parameters with adaptive learning protocols." Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest as he watched them talk. Emma deserved this. Deserved to have her ideas taken seriously, to be mentored by someone who could open doors he couldn't. But the practical realities of their situation loomed large. As if reading his thoughts, Victoria turned to him. "Marcus, do you realize what you have here? Your daughter isn't just good with cars. She's developing solutions that could revolutionize automotive diagnostics." "I know," he said softly, "but knowing something's valuable and being able to do something about it are different things." Victoria was quiet for a moment, studying them both. Then she pulled out her phone and pulled up a calendar. "Emma, how would you feel about presenting some of these ideas to my engineering team?" Emma's pencil clattered to the floor. "What? We have a summer internship program. It's highly competitive, but..." Victoria smiled, a genuine warmth replacing her usual corporate polish. "I think we might be able to make an exception for exceptional talent." Marcus started to protest. They couldn't afford to take time away from the garage, couldn't risk getting Emma's hopes up, but the look of pure joy on his daughter's face stopped him. "First," Victoria held up a hand, "we need to finish fixing this Ferrari. Consider it your practical entrance exam." She winked at Emma, "though I'd say you're already passing with flying colors." Emma grabbed her sketchbook, energy renewed. "Dad, let's try implementing my modification now. I think if we..." As they turned back to the car, Marcus caught Victoria watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. Whatever game she was playing, whatever her true motives were, she'd just given Emma something priceless: recognition of her potential. And for that, he was willing to take whatever risks came next. The preliminary contract sat on Marcus's worn office desk like an alien artifact, its Sterling Innovations letterhead gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Victoria had placed it there with careful precision, her expression neutral but expectant. "I don't understand," Marcus said, scanning the document's first page. "A partnership?" "More specifically, a division of Sterling Innovations dedicated to specialized automotive restoration and diagnostic innovation." Victoria leaned against his desk, her corporate armor softened by 2 days of watching him work. "With you as Chief Technical Officer and Lead Engineer." Marcus looked through the office window to where Emma was still working on the Ferrari, her movements confident and precise. "Why me? You have entire departments of engineers with degrees from top universities. Because they can't do what you do." Victoria pulled out a chair and sat, her usual businesslike demeanor mixing with something more personal. "In the past 48 hours, you've solved a problem that stumped some of the best mechanics in the country. But more importantly, you've shown me something that can't be taught in any university." She gestured to the garage, where various customers' cars sat in different stages of repair. You don't just fix machines, Marcus. You understand them. You see patterns others miss. And most importantly, you've passed that gift on to your daughter. The mention of Emma made Marcus's throat tight. The internship offer. Stand separately, Victoria said firmly. Emma's earned that on her own merit. This, she tapped. The contract, this is about building something bigger, something that could help both our worlds. Marcus picked up the contract, the paper heavy in his hands. The terms were generous, more than generous. A 6-figure salary, equity in the new division, complete technical autonomy. And buried in the middle, a clause about educational benefits for immediate family members. You've thought this through, he said quietly. Victoria smiled. I'm a CEO, Marcus. Planning ahead is what I do. She paused, then added more softly, but I'll admit, some aspects of this proposal evolved recently. Their eyes met, and for a moment the air seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. Marcus looked away first, his gaze returning to Emma. What exactly would this involve? Initially, setting up a state-of-the-art restoration facility, handpicking your team, developing standardized versions of your diagnostic methods. Victoria's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Emma's adaptive diagnostic system could be the cornerstone of a whole new approach to automotive maintenance. The scope of it made Marcus's head spin. And my customers here would have access to better facilities and resources than ever before. Victoria stood, moving to the window. I'm not asking you to abandon what you've built, Marcus. I'm offering you a chance to expand it, to help more people on a larger scale. Marcus joined her at the window. Outside, Emma was explaining something to Joe Miller, who had stopped by to check on his truck. The old farmer was nodding clearly, impressed by whatever solution she'd devised. There's one more thing, Victoria said, her voice softer. This isn't just about business for me anymore. These past 2 days, watching you and Emma work, I've seen something I thought had disappeared from the corporate world, something genuine, something real. Marcus turned to study her face, seeing past the polished exterior to something more vulnerable. Why does this matter so much to you? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Because 20 years ago, I was a lot like Emma, full of ideas, dreams, potential, but I didn't have anyone to open doors for me. I had to fight for every opportunity, sacrifice everything that didn't directly serve my goals. She smiled sadly. I succeeded, but sometimes I wonder about the cost. The honesty in her voice struck a chord in Marcus. He looked back at the contract, seeing it now not just as a business proposition, but as something more personal, a bridge between worlds. I'll need time to think about it, he said finally. Victoria nodded, gathering her belongings. Of course, but Marcus, she paused at the office door. Don't take too long. Some opportunities only come once in a lifetime. After she left, Marcus sat at his desk. The contract opened before him. Through the window, he could hear Emma's laughter mixing with the sound of tools against metal, the familiar symphony of their life together. Change was coming, one way or another. The question was whether he was brave enough to embrace it. The yellowed newspaper clipping trembled slightly in Marcus's hands as he sat alone in his office that evening. The headline still had the power to stop his breath. Local woman dies in highway accident. Mechanical failure suspected. Below, it's Sarah's smile beamed from a grainy photograph forever frozen in time. He rarely allowed himself to look at it, keeping it tucked away in the same drawer as unpaid bills and deferred dreams. But Victoria's proposition had stirred up old memories, making him question decisions made in grief's long shadow. I thought I might find you here. Victoria's voice startled him. She stood in the doorway, her corporate attire replaced by casual clothes that somehow made her seem more real. Her eyes fell to the newspaper clipping, and something in her expression shifted. I did my research, she said quietly, stepping into the office. About the accident. About the manufacturer's recall that came 2 months too late. Marcus carefully folded the article, his fingers finding the well-worn creases. Is that why you chose me? Because of Sarah? No. Victoria sat in the chair across from him. But it helps me understand you better. She hesitated, then reached into her bag, pulling out a photograph of her own. We all have our ghosts, Marcus. The photo showed a much younger Victoria standing next to an older man in mechanic's coveralls, both beaming in front of a partially restored Chevrolet. My father, she explained. He had a shop about half the size of this one. Not as organized, but full of the same kind of magic. Marcus studied the photo, noting the pride in both their faces. What happened? Progress. The word carried years of bitterness. A developer bought the whole block, offered my father a fraction of what the business was worth. When he refused, she trailed off, her perfectly manicured nails digging slightly into the photo's edges. They found other ways to force him out. Zoning changes, health code violations, death by 1,000 paper cuts. And that's why you went into business? Victoria's laugh held no humor. I went to business school with one goal, to never be powerless. Again, worked my way up, learned every trick, played their game better than they did. She gestured around the garage. But somewhere along the way, I lost what made my father's shop special. The human element, the soul. Emma's voice drifted in from the garage, humming while she worked on the Ferrari. The sound seemed to soften something in Victoria's face. When I saw you working with Emma, she continued, it reminded me of those days with my father. The joy of creation, the pride in doing something right, not just profitable. Marcus looked down at Sarah's article, then at Victoria's photo. After the accident, I almost gave up the garage. Couldn't bear to touch another engine, knowing what mechanical failure had cost me. What changed? Emma. A small smile touched his lips. She was 7, trying to fix her bike chain with my tools, making a complete mess of it, but so determined, just like her mother. He met Victoria's eyes. Sometimes the only way past loss is to find a new purpose. Victoria nodded slowly. That's partly why I made the offer. Not just because of your skill or Emma's potential, but because you've preserved something precious, something I want to help protect and grow, not corporate engineer into submission. Marcus leaned back, studying her. The polished CEO facade had cracked, revealing someone more complex, more human, someone who understood loss and redemption in ways he hadn't expected. Sarah used to say that every broken thing was just waiting for the right person to fix it, he said quietly. Not just machines, but people too. Victoria's eyes met his, holding a mix of vulnerability and hope that made his heart skip. And what do you say? Before he could answer, Emma appeared in the doorway, excitement written across her face. Dad, the Ferrari, it's running, not just for 30 seconds, but continuously. She paused, sensing the emotional weight in the room. Everything okay? Marcus looked at the newspaper clipping, at Victoria's photo, at his daughter's concerned face. 3 generations of dreams, losses, and possibilities, all converging in this moment. Yeah, sweetheart, he said, standing up. I think everything's going to be just fine. The Ferrari's keys dangled from a custom Sterling Innovations keychain, catching the early morning light. Victoria held them out to Marcus, a challenge and an invitation in her gesture. You did the impossible, she said. You should be the one to test it. Marcus looked at the F40, its Rosso Corsa paint gleaming after Emma's careful detailing. They'd worked through the night, fine-tuning every system, triple-checking every modification. Now, in the crisp dawn air, the car seemed to vibrate with potential. Actually,